Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really complex situation, isn't it? The Iranian nuclear program and these latest talks with the U.S.
Yeah, it's constantly evolving, and you've gathered some great sources for us to dig into.
We have news reports, some deep analysis. Our job really is to pull out the key insights for you, our listener.
Exactly. We've got Newsweek, Al Jazeera on the recent Oman talks. Then there's the Arms Control Association looking at, the future diplomacy, plus that helpful historical timeline.
Right, and perspectives from the Atlantic Council, materials outlining the big disagreements too, and maybe some alternative paths.
It's quite a mix.
So the central question, it seems, is, okay, there are some positive signals from these talks, but wow, the obstacles still look pretty significant.
They really do.
So our mission today is to unpack those roadblocks. How did we get here, and what might the paths forward actually look like? Let's get you the big picture.
Sound good.
Let's start right with the latest of these talks in Oman.
Okay, so Newsweek and Al Jazeera, they both reported on these negotiations. They happened Saturday, April 12th, 2025 in Muscat.
Oman's capital, right. Oman seems to be playing a key mediating role here.
Definitely. Bringing the sides together.
And I noticed the description from Iran's state media, IRNA. They call the atmosphere constructive and based on mutual respect.
Which, given the history.
Exactly. That feels noteworthy in itself.
It does. And the key outcome seems to be an agreement for another round. Both sides, the U.S., with envoy Steve Witkoff, Iran with Foreign Minister Araghchi, they've agreed to meet again next week, starting April 19th.
Though the location isn't specified yet?
Not publicly, no.
And Oman's foreign minister, Badir al-Busaidi, Al Jazeera quoted him saying it was a friendly atmosphere conducive to bridging viewpoints. Pretty optimistic language.
Very much so. Especially aiming for regional and global peace and stability.
Yeah.
It's a high bar.
Yeah. And Newsweek makes the crucial point. This is all happening after years of really strained relations, particularly after the U.S. pulled out of the JCPOA. That context is everything.
Absolutely. That withdrawal really eroded trust.
And just a level set for everyone. The core issue remains. The U.S. accuses Iran of seeking nuclear weapons tech.
While Iran maintains, very firmly, that its program is purely for civilian energy purposes.
Right. So these talks, according to the reporting, are likely aimed at, what? Limiting the nuclear program?
That seems to be number one. Then exploring ways to ease sanctions, the economic pressure.
And also addressing the wider regional activities. That's often part of the U.S. concern.
Yes, those three elements seem to be the focus, based on what we're reading.
What's also interesting, Newsweek noted, silence so far from the U.S. Department and the White House on these talks.
Yeah, no official statements yet.
Which could mean anything, really. Cautious optimism, keeping things under wraps.
Could be any of those. Maybe they're still debriefing, figuring out the next steps before going public. Hard to say.
Okay, so that's the immediate snapshot. But like you said, the history is crucial. We need to talk about the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action.
Absolutely. That Arms Control Association timeline is really useful here, and it starts somewhere quite surprising for many people.
Which is?
The U.S. actually supplied Iran's first nuclear reactor back in 1967, the Tehran Research Reactor.
Wow, really?
Yes, and initially, it ran on highly enriched uranium supplied by the U.S. It shows just how dramatically things have shifted over the decades.
That's a fascinating piece of history. So what led from that cooperation to the tension we see now?
Well, concerns just grew over time about Iran's intentions. By 2003, the IAEA, the International Nuclear Watchdog, was calling for Iran to suspend enrichment.
And then came UN Security Council resolutions.
Exactly. Between 2006 and 2010, several resolutions demanding suspension, increasing the pressure.
Then the Obama administration shifted strategy, deciding to fully engage in those P5+1 talks. A big change, wasn't it?
A very significant shift, yeah. And that diplomacy, that engagement, eventually led to the JCPOA in 2015, the deal between Iran and the P5+1 countries, the U.S., U.K., France, China, Russia, plus Germany.
And the core of that deal, just to remind ourselves, Iran accepted limits on enrichment, stockpiles, R&D.
Significant limits, yes, in exchange for relief from major nuclear-related sanctions. Plus, crucially, enhanced IAEA monitoring. More inspectors, more access.
The idea from the Obama administration's perspective was that this would block Iran's path to a bomb.
That was the stated goal, yes. Prevent them from getting nuclear weapons, at least for a significant period. But, well, the deal didn't last indefinitely.
Well, it certainly didn't. The Trump administration's withdrawal in 2018, that was a seismic event. and reimposing
A
sanctions.
complete reversal. And that, as the Arms Control Association points out, directly prompted Iran to start stepping back from its own commitments under the deal from 2019 onwards, incrementally breaching the limits.
And the Biden administration came in saying the JCPOA was, what, beyond revival?
That was their assessment, yeah. Though they did signal willingness for a mutual return to compliance. If Iran came back into compliance, the U.S. would too. But by then...
Too much had changed, both technically and politically.
Precisely. The ground had shifted quite a bit.
Which leads us to where Iran's program is now. It sounds like they've made quite a lot of progress since the JCPOA limits were effectively abandoned.
They have, significantly.
Yeah.
Kelsey Davenport at the Arms Control Association notes that since 2021, Iran's really invested in more proliferation-sensitive capabilities.
Okay, what does that mean exactly? Proliferation sensitive.
It means technologies and activities that could potentially be used for developing nuclear weapons, even if they also have civilian applications. And the thinking is, this gives them political leverage and maybe gets them closer to being a nuclear weapons threshold state.
Right, that term again, threshold state. Can you break that down for us?
Sure. It basically means a country hasn't decided to build the bomb, or maybe hasn't built one yet, but they've got the technology, the materials, the know-how.
Yeah.
Essentially, they could produce weapons relatively quickly if they made the political decision to do so.
So they're right on the edge, capability-wise.
That's the idea. And Davenport points out, Iranian leaders themselves have said they have the technical capability, even if they say it's not their policy to build weapons right now.
And technically, what are we seeing? What are the big advancements?
Well, the enrichment program is way beyond the JCPOA limits. They're enriching uranium up to 60% purity of U-235.
And weapons grade is around 90%?
Typically, yes.
Yeah.
So 60% is, uncomfortably close. Much, much higher than the roughly 3–5% needed for civilian power reactors, which was the kind of level envisioned under the JCPOA.
That's a big jump.
It is. And they're using advanced centrifuges, the machines that do the enriching more advanced models and in greater numbers than the JCPOA allowed, even for research.
So even without hitting that 90% mark, these steps are still deeply worrying for international security.
Absolutely. And the analysis suggests Iran might be using these advancements as a deterrent. Sort of an implicit threat, don't attack us because look what we could do. It changes their security thinking.
Okay, so we have this recent diplomacy, but also these significant Iranian advances. What are the biggest hurdles now to getting some kind of new deal?
There are several, and they're pretty fundamental. The analyses from Arms Control Association and Atlantic Council lay them out. One major one is just how the two sides see negotiations.
Nice.
Well, Iran tends to view it as needing mutual simultaneous steps. You give something, I give something, at the same time, roughly equal value.
Whereas the U.S. and its allies
Often see it differently. Because Iran breached the JCPOA limits first, the view is often that Iran needs to take the first steps back, verifiable steps, maybe irreversible ones, before getting significant sanctions relief.
So a sequencing problem. Who goes first?
Exactly. It's a fundamental disagreement on the process itself.
Another issue seems to be Iran's focus on its rights under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT.
Yes, they consistently demand recognition of their legitimate right to the full nuclear fuel cycle, including enrichment, as an NPT signatory. The U.S. has historically pushed back against that broad interpretation, though sometimes diplomatic language tries to finesse it.
And then the specifics of enrichment limits, just going back to the old JCPOA level, seems off the table.
That seems to be the consensus, yeah. Given Iran's progress and the knowledge they've gained, which you can't unlearn, going back to those old limits, is probably not feasible or verifiable enough.
So any new deal needs new limits, maybe even regional ones.
That's being discussed. New limits, perhaps negotiated regionally. But a key U.S. goal would almost certainly be stopping that 60% enrichment, making sure that's prohibited and verifiable.
Then there's the scope of the deal. Iran wants to keep it just nuclear, right?
That's their preference, yes. Focus solely on the nuclear file.
But the U.S. often wants to talk about missiles, regional behavior.
Exactly. The U.S. has historically linked these issues, or wanted to. Whether they get bundled into one deal or handled on separate tracks, that's a major potential sticking point. How comprehensive should it be?
And it sounds like maybe just offering sanctions relief isn't enough of a carrot anymore.
That's a really key point. After the U.S. pulled out of the JCPOA and snapped sanctions back, the long-term value of sanctions relief alone might seem less reliable to Iran.
So they may want more?
Possibly. Things like guarantees for foreign investment, specific trade exemptions, maybe even support for peaceful nuclear cooperation under strict safeguards. More durable incentives.
And verification. Given everything, that must be even more critical now.
Absolutely essential.
Yeah.
The U.S. and partners will almost certainly demand very intrusive, robust monitoring, maybe even beyond the JCPOA's already tough measures. Real-time monitoring, ways to ensure no weaponization work is happening.
And just the underlying mistrust. That history looms large.
Hugely. The JCPOA withdrawal created deep mistrust on the Iranian side, and Iranian officials often say they won't negotiate under pressure or coercion. It makes the whole atmosphere very difficult.
Finally, that IAEA investigation into past activities. Still unresolved.
Still a sticking point, yes. The investigation into undeclared nuclear material and activities from years ago, the U.S. and others see Iran's full cooperation as vital for building trust about the peaceful nature of the program today.
Okay, so looking forward, what are the potential paths for diplomacy? What does the Arms Control Association suggest?
Well, Kelsey Davenport argues strongly that the next U.S. administration, whoever it is, needs to engage Iran quickly. The window for diplomacy might not stay open forever, especially with Iran's ongoing advances.
And simply trying to revive the old JCPOA won't cut it.
Seems unlikely. She argues for a new playbook, one that really grapples with Iran's technical gains and its changed security outlook.
So a new framework, maybe borrowing some elements from the JCPOA.
Could be. You might keep some of the good monitoring aspects, but they'd likely need to be even stronger, more comprehensive, because you can't reverse the knowledge Iran has gained.
And the enrichment limits would need a complete rethink.
Yes, recalibrated entirely. Davenport even floats the idea of regional talks to cap enrichment for all countries in the area, maybe at reactor grade levels. That's an interesting, broader approach.
The Arms Control Association also mentions situating a nuclear deal within a wider U.S.-Iran strategy. What's the thinking there?
The idea is, while the nuclear deal itself is the priority, it might be more sustainable if it's part of a bigger picture.
Like what?
Like the U.S. supporting regional security talks that include Iran, having separate channels for other issues like missiles or regional conflicts, maybe providing security assurances to U.S. partners.
So not making the nuclear deal dependent on solving everything else.
Exactly. But creating a broader context that might address Iran's wider security worries. Helping dialogue between Iran and its neighbors is seen as key. Maybe helping Iran feel it doesn't need nuclear weapons for its security?
Okay, let's try to boil this down for our listener. The key takeaways from this deep dive.
Well, I think it's clear, isn't it? It's incredibly complex, constantly shifting. The fact that talks are happening again is positive, sure. But the disagreements are deep. Iran's program has advanced significantly. These are huge hurdles. The JCPOA offers lessons, but just going back seems really unlikely.
So the focus now is on finding a new path, one that fits today's reality and tries to rebuild some trust.
That seems to be the challenge, yeah. Forging something new.
And maybe a final thought for you listening. Given this history of mistrust, given the technical capabilities now involved, what kind of verification would really give everyone the assurance needed for a deal to stick?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe more importantly, are those kinds of super intrusive measures even politically possible for both sides to actually agree to and implement?
That really is the crux of it, isn't it? The core challenge for any talks moving forward.
It definitely is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.